Welcome to Archispeak, the podcast that talks about what it's like to work in the profession of architecture. Dude. Emergency. Fuck. All of a sudden, I just went to go tell Jessie because she just was taking the laundry out. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be... She's like, we have a problem. Water had been spraying in the garage all night long.
Crap.
From a bad hose connection. From
the washer?
Well, it's from the washer over to like this soap dispenser thing that, like this commercial type soap dispenser where it mixes water and soap at various percentages. It was for her old cleaning business.
Oh, okay.
Now we use it a lot still for all of our cleaning supplies. And it was just leaking all night long. It's spraying everywhere. So she was like trying to figure it out, like the valves and everything, and she did. She like just shut the whole water off to the house. You know?
Well, that'll do it.
That solved it.
Wow, that sucks.
Yeah, it's not good. It's now like that corner of the garage is soaking wet. So
Bunch of stuff
What have you been doing this morning?
That's
just the last 5 minutes.
What have I been doing? Detailing.
Oh, you're still working.
Yeah, we'll be doing it till Friday.
Wow.
Is that the...
Well,
it's the first interim deadline, and there's like a whole slew, and I'm just seething in anger. Like,
what are interim deadlines all about anyway?
I mean,
they don't really mean a lot.
They don't. In this particular case, I'm not quite sure they mean much of anything.
Except getting you angry.
Well, I mean, getting me angry at the fact that I did a progress print, which of course took 4 hours of time because I can't work in Revit while I'm printing from Revit. Yeah. And it literally took me 4 hours to print to a PDF.
We're going through the setting up automation for that so that it happens in the middle of the night.
So I'm looking at all of our old sets and I'm looking at our new sets, and though there's some differences, there's not a lot of progress. Mm-hmm. And so
not stuff that you see.
Well, I mean, we've got all these different things. Like as of yesterday, I was looking at. Really, you're going to start that?
It's the mascot.
Yeah, let me put.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Yeah. Meow Mix. Hold on real fast. So, no, but yeah, Kitty gone. Kitty go bye-bye.
Bye, Kitty.
Yeah, he's been in a mood where he's been attacking people and biting them and drawing blood and stuff. So, not very many people are happy with him, and so he comes to me to for safety. I'm like, oh man, you get what you deserve if you, for absolutely no reason, they're like, oh kitty, I love you, and they're petting the kitty, and the kitty's just like, oh, and now at this point in time is when I flip on my crazy switch and start biting you. But so yeah, I looked at our foundation plans, and I mean, I get to blame myself for all of this because, as I assign all of this work, I didn't follow through with the tracking of it getting done to a level of completeness where I call them printable or print ready.
Yeah.
Still did this.
Well, the stuff's in the model, but it's not the information's there, but it's not presented in a way that makes sense for sheets of drawings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and the whole spiel that we always go through of until we build from the model, you got to have documents, and the documents have got to be right. And to be quite honest with you, for quite a while, I don't see that happening on such a large scale, only because bigger projects can afford to do that, because bigger projects can afford to hire contractors who are more innovative. Smaller projects you're going to get the smaller contractors because you want it to be affordable. Most of the time, they're not innovating the way that larger contractors or larger, construction management groups are. And so if they're not innovating, they're not going to build from a model. They're going to build from paper.
Yeah, totally. Well, and if the stuff isn't on the paper, then they have something to complain about.
Yeah.
Right?
Sadly. So I drew to a print level of completeness 3 full sheets yesterday. They say on average that it takes one, like AIA put out something like ages ago. It's just like to fill like a full sheet of documents, it usually takes 40 hours of coordination and documentation and everything else. And I had to put all of that aside and just basically like crank. I mean, so this isn't what most people who do 3D models wants to hear. But when your models are almost there, but not quite there, but you need to have your details 100% there, sometimes you got to resort to a little bit of component drafting, a little bit of, just using all of the different components within the little Revit box, as well as drafting, which 2D drafting in Revit leaves something to be desired, but I really don't like doing 2D drafting in Revit, but
it's hard because you will not remember everywhere that you drafted, and nobody's going to go back and replace that stuff.
Of course.
They won't be able to find all of it. They'll replace some of it, right? Because you said this is a progress set.
Yeah.
So why do you have to have the details 100% complete at a progress set?
Because it...
Is it for pricing?
It's, I mean, they may look at it a little bit for pricing, but...
Yeah, the thing that, the downfall of BIM everywhere is exactly what just happened to your model, which is, there's lots of good information stored in the model elements that is not getting translated to the sheets. And so the deadline comes and all the rules go out the window so that it looks right on the sheets.
Mm-hmm.
But the long-term detriment of that is larger than anybody really thinks about because it's not their problem.
Right.
So when the firm at some point is like, hey, how many 30 by 32 classrooms have we done in the last 5 years, right? Or how many times have we used this detail component or this detail or, data type stuff. It's broken.
Yep.
Totally broken. And so then it doesn't ever evolve to that level because of this deadline kind of stuff, and because those elements weren't already made, and because people weren't taking it to the level that they needed to when they needed to, they were probably distracted by something else in the model that needed to get fixed, or right. How these things kind of just unravel and you end up following these offshoots until completion. And pretty soon you realize that you did this thing that probably really needed to be done, but it was not what you were supposed to be doing.
Well, in the classic method of schematic design, design development, and construction documents, and how you assign X amount of time to each of those, and usually like construction documentation took the longest. It's because you had to commit,
Yes.
Hard deadline had to commit. The one thing that I do definitely see is a detriment to BIM is you can, if somebody says, I was thinking about that, and what if we change this? And then, you put all of your efforts into like remodeling that area that, somebody wants to change. And okay, so now all of anything that you had documented towards that point has all changed. But if depending, and like you said, if depending on what it is, it doesn't really, so I don't think mentally, I guess where I was going is I don't think we've caught up with the shift in the amount of time that each of those things take. And so we're still making construction documentation more top heavy when we should be making the design development phase probably the longest of them. So at that particular phase, you can detail out, you can basically model it right.
Yeah. Or get stuff blocked out so that those drawings update themselves.
Right.
One of the things that I think is a big pitfall in the realization of the potential of building information modeling for real, not just, some dumb Revit model, is that people don't spend enough time in that early stage understanding the right and wrong way that the program expects things to work or for people to operate it. And they're bringing old bad habits, typically, because firms don't take the time to train people with new bad habits or even establish what those new good habits, should be. So, for instance, how many times a day do you hide elements in Revit? Okay, I'm just going to leave you right there so that you don't incriminate yourself any further. So, that is something that you should never do.
Yeah, I agree.
In all caps.
I totally agree with you.
But I know because my wife uses Revit on a daily basis as well in the room next to me when she's working on smaller architects projects. And she goes to that little light bulb icon and flips that switch, and it's a whole different world. This is like Stranger Things, like the upside down, right? Mm-hmm. There's all that stuff in pink, just all of a sudden shows up, and it's like, oh, that's where that is. Maybe you'll find it that way. I'll probably find it, because you got a hidden category or view filters or categories turned off or like any number of things, right? Like there's 52 ways to hide things in Revit. So, this is bad practice. Yep. But do firms actually give people the tools and the knowledge to do it right? No, only a few self-starters, like really motivated people who are like Revit warriors on the weekends and at nights, who are reading the forums and learning how to do this stuff, really know how to do that stuff right.
Right.
And they don't have the time or the agency to teach everybody in the firm to do that stuff. And so they will just bitch and complain about it, right? They will continue to do it right, but they will constantly be rolling their eyes with everybody else who does it wrong. And the firm is not proactive in getting people to do these things the right way. So these projects continually are broken.
Yep.
So we never realize the full potential of it because of, everyone's just trying to get it done. Everyone's just trying to get it done as fast as possible because of that deadline or because of this or because of that. And so therefore, the contractor does end up rebuilding the Revit model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Their own way.
Yeah.
And getting paid for it, right? And actually billing the client for that. So this is what, digital practice in my office is trying to sort out for an 80-year-old firm who's always kind of slightly followed the trend, not ever set the trend, not ever like on the cusp of the trend, never out way in front of the trend, but just followed it, right?
Right.
I mean, we did Revit and we switched quote unquote to Revit in 2009. All projects must be in Revit by that date, September 9th, 2009, 999. And did that happen? No, it was a goal, right? And obviously there are still people who loved their AutoCAD and still wanted to do it in AutoCAD. But obviously Revit's been out a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
And we were using it on projects before that too, but not to the extent at which now every project is done in Revit or whatever. So it's funny because we still drag those really old bad habits along with us. We still bring in CAD files and link in CAD files and explode CAD files. And it's funny because now you talk to anybody who knows anything about Revit and they're like, don't even link those CAD files. Don't even link them in. We don't want them in here. We want all native geometry and we want it all to be smart. Stop drafting with detail lines. Stop hiding stuff. And it's like, these are all the things that we did for 10 years in Revit, or longer. So it's a very difficult shift for firms to make. And that's why I think it's even harder for big firms to make those shifts because everybody wants to do it their way and operate like their own little small firm that's a team within a larger firm. And maybe there's some guidelines they might follow. But like you said early, You had to put the guidelines aside.
Well, yeah. I mean, and it's a shame that we do because, I think all the productivity that we have for people modeling things sometimes gets thrown out the window for, kind of like a more traditional method of documentation. And it kind of sucks that, you have all of this work and it's not being used to its fullest potential because people don't know how to quite bring it home. Or you're right, it's those people who are working, on weekends and things like that. So, funny enough, I get a Zoom chat yesterday that, and I quote, "Based on what I've seen with this project, I would really like to push having specific Revit training for everybody we hire."
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. Yep.
Which basic
and this is this is across the board. This isn't even just technical skills, because I remember early on with getting digital practice up and running at HMC, and we did establish a training arm to digital practice specifically for what you're talking about, and putting the right people in the right places that are fully dedicated and not billable necessarily to projects, but are just resources.
Yeah.
Like shifting the business. You're talking about shifting hours on a project where appropriate, which I think everybody's known about, like the bell curve of hours for the phase of a project should be shifted more towards DD and less away from CDs. But we spent a lot of time kind of strategically planning that out so that could happen. But it still doesn't happen enough.
The reason why
you've got to get people who want to learn that.
Why it doesn't, right? And I learned this a couple of years ago when people were really trying to adopt BIM very vigorously. And it's because, especially with like established clients or institutional clients, they still bill traditionally. They have the contract is, their contract is set up for, and it means that they have to change the way that they do it. And a lot of times they don't forward fund projects to like basically include all of the documentation process. They're like, okay, well, we can take you through SD. All right, well, we've got enough money to take you through DD. Okay, well, these are real short, in our mind, these are two really short progress sets, whatever we want to call them. And so we know that, your concerted effort's going to be in construction documentation. You're going to be asking for a lot more money. We don't have that yet. Or our project isn't funded for all of that stuff or whatever. And so they honestly do that. I mean, we constantly get asked, like, all right, we want you to break out your contract per phase. Yeah, and let us know how much you're going to be billing per phase, so then we can tell you how far along you need to go. And
I've actually saw somebody tweet recently that they're working on a project where the client was having architects compete per phase.
Oh, that's so,
And how many architects are signing up like, yeah, I'll do that.
Well, and we don't do ourselves any favors by basically undercutting each other. And it's just like, okay, well, Evan said that he was going to do this for $1,000. So Cormac came in and said he's going to do it for $950. And
cheaper is better.
Cheaper is better. But,
never mind all the institutional knowledge you're bringing from that previous phase so that you can actually do the next phase faster.
It's just like, it's
cheaper is better.
It's like how, firms, and I've seen this in countless firms throughout my own history, that will have a team that goes through pre-design, then the design, and then the construction documentation, and then they hand it off to a team of people for construction administration that has no institutional knowledge of the actual project prior to that.
Seeing it for the first time.
Yeah. And then they basically have to struggle through decisions that were made previously, and then certain decisions, that maybe the client wasn't 100% bought off on during the design phase, or can't remember why they made that decision. And so they want to undo that. And so now they're spending more time with ASIs and change orders and all those other things to try to make sure that the way that they want it now today, rather than thinking about, a year ago when that decision was made. In the consistency, the value in the consistency on a project is so underrated and so forgotten that, I mean, we do ourselves an injustice when we're doing things like that, where a client is going out and bidding different architects per phases, because they're actually losing more money and more time to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and firms do the same thing. They lose more money and more time by breaking up project teams. It's like, oh, okay, well, I need Evan over on this project because it's starting, you know, the design phase. So I need Evan over on the design phase side of things. So I'm going to take I'm going to take his institutional knowledge of this project and just hope that he, you know, within the 24 hours that we ask him to move from one project to another, he can get Cormac up to speed on everything that he's done over the course of the last 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck with that.
Question, what position is the person who sent you the message?
A more senior person.
Okay. So is more senior person also fully on board with giving people the time it takes to learn how to use the application?
Yes.
Correctly.
This particular person, absolutely.
Because there's so many that aren't.
But the problem is that senior person is on the project, but not in a role where they can influence the firm making decisions like that. But if that person and me and other people, you know, basically sing in a choir for that particular, you know, for that, let's get training. In fact, I followed up and I said, you know, I've suggested that before. And I was like, and honestly, even with the old timers, we should have a quarterly training for updates and new tricks and things like that.
Stuff that the application does you didn't even know it could do is worthwhile.
There are so many things that Revit can do that I know I don't know. But the problem is that because of just the time that it takes for me to do projects and get so there's two levels of training. There's levels of training in the actual software that they use to actually, you know, document the building. But then there is also the knowledge of how to put all of that stuff all of the tools that they have that BIM has, how to put them all together and what makes the most sense and what is the right product for the right, you know, aesthetic, you know, application and all of these all the like the institutional architectural knowledge. Yeah. I spend most of my time doing that I can't stay up with.
No, you can't do it all.
Yeah.
No way.
But
totally agree. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so like the tricks and the updates and what is, you know, like, so I currently have on my screens, plural, a couple of different Revit models open. One is in 2018. One is in 2019. Well, two are in 2019. Now I am flirting with danger that I have 3 models open and I'm working in the cloud. And
we better cut this part out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Incrimination.
Well, but I mean, the thing about it is that it's just, you know, like just looking at what Revit 19 and Revit 20 do differently than Revit 18. And so making, you know, like letting people know, hey, we're about to roll out, you know, using Revit 2020. And so here are all of the changes. It's almost like, you know, when a new code rolls out, they roll the code out and then they roll out a commentary to let you know what is different from IBC 2015 to IBC 2018. What are the difference between all of those? And, you know, being able to understand what those differences are is just enough of like, you know, those are the things that it's like, oh, 2019 has tabs. 2018 doesn't have tabs. Tabs are great. Yeah.
You have to work differently in them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's crazy to me about that is that this is the tool that we use to deliver our projects. Mm-hmm. If you had to prioritize, this is at the top, this tool. But the firm just thinks of software updates like this is an app on your phone, yep. Right? And it just gets updated in the background and it just runs a little bit better. Never mind the fact that they changed 25% of what's going on under the hood, and the way that the UI works is different this time, and this and this and this and this. And there is never any course provided to the multitudes of people, plural, right? You have multiple screens on your desk. There's multitudes of people using this software every single day. They're going to definitely be using it, if not on the project they're working on, the next one for sure. And nobody ever says, hey, let's sit down and go through everything that's different, because this is the tool that we use and we take it that seriously.
Yeah.
That is absolutely bonkers to me that we just treat this like an app update on your phone.
And to the point of my friend whose text was, firms essentially think that all of their new hires, whether they're fresh out of school or coming from somewhere else, automatically
know Revit, right?
You know Revit.
That's a quote. You know Revit, right?
Exactly. And it's just like, or they do like, those little online, Revit tests, and you take the little Revit test and all that other stuff, and they're like, okay, you're fine, good, go. Man. And then throw
every word in that sentence has its own set of quotes around it.
I know, right?
You know Revit, right? And it's such a generalized thing. It's like it is not one of those things. It's like you know how to drive a tank, right?
Yeah. And
it's like, well, I've done it in a video game once, right?
But so here's let's use that analogy real quick. So I went to school I'll put it the only way I can phrase it. I went to school in the Army to shoot down airplanes. Mm-hmm. And I was taught the basic of how to shoot down those planes in what's called Advanced Individual Training, or AIT. It's like the school. So you go to basic training and then you go to basically learn your job. And so you learn your job. And then you go to your unit, but then they don't actually like immediately throw you into the fire and say, okay, this is exactly what you need to do. They teach you how that unit does things. So let's say
standards.
So if I'm going to go and serve, a tour at HMC, then I am going to take whatever knowledge I have, and then I'm going to learn the HMC way of doing things, or in my case, the Air St. Gross or the ASG way of doing things.
You should probably choose that version.
I should probably choose that one because that's where I am and that's where I want to be. So I remember, I remember in 2007, we went to the San Antonio AIA convention, and there was Revit. It was like the new kid on the block, and everybody, it was a few years old, but I think this was like right when Autodesk bought it and, started integrating it into their world and all this other stuff. And
it's definitely picking up steam at that point.
It was definitely picking up steam. And so everybody was flocking around to look at all of the demonstrations and stuff and oohing and eyeing and everything else. And in 2007, think about this. In 2007, they was still trying to do that little hybrid integration of things. But also at 2007, the friend of mine that I went to the AIA convention with was telling me about how the firm that he worked for, and it's a large firm and it's got multiple offices across the country, how they mostly in the South, but how they basically have a and I'll just give them a shout out. I mean, LRK, Looney Rick's Kiss, I believe is the LRK part, but LRK out of Memphis, Tennessee, and they basically have an LRK Academy. And so for either 1 week for more seasoned professionals who know the software and stuff, or 2 weeks for people who are fresh out of school, will basically go to that immediately once they're hired. And they will start to learn the LRK way and how to use all of this software, how LRK uses the software and all that other stuff. This was way back then. That's now 13 years ago. And I don't know if firms have fully bought off on that. And it sounds like you guys do try to do that.
Yeah. In the last few years, we've developed HMC Academy. And our own version of that is the Digital Academy, which is a special set of technical skills, right, in applications like we're talking about.
So we have ASG Academy, and we do a lot of different things with it. We do like workflow Wednesdays, and we do like these thirsty Thursdays, and it's all these different things that we do to basically kind of do an internal enrichment of knowledge, and certain people will, train things. It's like, we just recently had something about Format and using Format and all of that other stuff. But, these are things that if they become institutional usage in the firm, need to have more than just a blush, need to have an actual training
Absolutely.
session.
So the reason I asked if your person would be willing is, so what I've seen happen recently, and especially with the pandemic stuff that's gone on, where people are all kind of off in their own little world on many levels because they're not in an office and you can't see what they're doing. And not that I don't subscribe to that at all, but I do expect if you've signed up to come to a course that you're going to show up.
Yeah.
And just be professional about it. If you can't come because of some reason, you need to let us know so that we can fill your spot where somebody else could do it. And that problem is actually coming from two different directions. It could be coming from somebody who just is not on top of their own schedule and doesn't understand the importance of it and blah, blah, blah. The other part of it is that their supervisor doesn't think it's important and needs to make sure that that person is billable, which
Right.
I totally understand that position as well. So total catch-22 here, right, is somebody who really wants to come to a course and learn these skills, which are important for the firm and for the project and for the deliverable and for the future of how we do work. And then there's also kind of this tug of war going on where the deadline of the project always wins, or if there's something else, somebody will place uninformed urgency on it and say like, oh, this is the most important thing you could be doing right now, when it's really not, and just take them away from doing that and not tell anyone. So here's the deal. Like the new messaging is, this training is for your project, because I think a lot of times these people in positions of trying to fill hours for people so that they look busy or are busy aren't thinking about it from a point of view where it is for the team and for the project. They think it's for the individual, and they put that at the bottom of the list. So you already know Revit is kind of what they're thinking. But they don't realize that the training is going to enrich so many other levels, and it's going to transfer to other people.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody says, hey, how do I do this? They're going to go to that person because they know more, and they're going to teach them the right way to do it. The new messaging is, it's for your project, right? Because it is. This is going to make your project better, more profitable, less problems, less RFIs, all of those things down the road. But because the short-term blinders are on all the time, what am I doing today, right now, so that we're looking profitable? Just as like a default thing that I can throw in here right now is overwhelming for a lot of people, right? Like
Right.
that is
Right.
the highest priority thing that they can be doing right then. So, I mean, it's not like our training team is big and can just handle tons and tons of people at the end of the year because they've all skipped class until then, right? We can't do that. We have to get people in through all during the year. And it's just kind of alarming to me to see people get pulled out at the last second or just not show up and never message and not be professional about it. And this is my own like personal little rant right now, but I can only imagine it happens everywhere for companies that actually have set this up. And so it has to come from leadership to say, you have to go to this training. It is part of your job. It is not something you're doing on the side. It is not more important than this other stuff, because if you don't do it, we're not going to get better. We're not going to do things right. And then somebody else has to pick up the pieces that you left behind because you decided at 2 a.m. to hand draft those details, right? Like that's really what it comes back to. And I don't know what the answer is besides it's got to come from leadership to actually draw that line in the sand and say, this is of this level of importance. You have to do it. You have to commit to it.
Honestly, and I totally agree with you. I mean, there should be some level of, let's just call it continuing education, software training, whatever type of like training that goes into there always is part of the design development aspect of things, or the concept design, schematic design development phases that should go into and do somewhat go into research of products and things like that. But you should go one step further and have that that integral training into the project, because they're going, well, how am I going to get the owner to pay for you learning how to use this software? Well, they're expecting us to deliver a project with that software, so we should be trained on that particular software. So like when we go into construction administration and the construction manager is using a different software for like document management, that's different from what we do. We have to get trained on that software to use that software effectively so that we can communicate back and forth with them during construction administration. It's the same thing with the design tools that we use. And for any and all owner, in this, when we talk about size of projects and, budgets of projects and all this other stuff, it's hard to pass on some of that, the cost of training somebody up on something that the owner is assuming that you already know. But, when they say, hey, we demand that you deliver us a fully executable, Revit model, well, then what they're saying is that I expect that you're going to give me a fully competent, fully coordinated model, and I should be the one that's on the hook for making sure that you guys know how to use that. I know that's a little stretch.
Well, it's funny because it's like the computer doesn't do it itself, right? Like,
right.
This is it's made of people, right? It's
yeah.
That's how Revit models get built. They get built by people.
Right.
And if everybody's building it a different way, you're guaranteed to have a disaster at the end, and just something that kind of looks like a building. It's not going to function again to like the fullest potential of what it could be.
And so I know Revit competently enough to be able to deliver a building, but I know the building side of things more, and so that's where my value to the project and the firm and everything else comes from. And so, but then I need to be paired up with multitude of different people that have different levels of experience and different levels of knowledge and things like that, so that we can fully deliver that comprehensive, coordinated model that the owner is looking for.
And honestly, that should be a give and take. Like you're training those people you're matched up with on the architecture side, and they're enlightening you to what's possible in the software as expert operators.
And that is, yes, exactly. And that's exactly where I was going. And so, but because that's something that is an expectation, and for the most part, a contractual expectation from the owner, then the owner and firm leadership should realize that for that to happen, everybody should be properly trained. And so there should be a portion of all of that. I mean, if you think about it, we try to run people, and it doesn't sound realistic, but we try to run people like 100%, 80% billable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to do that literally means that there is no point in time, like say if I'm 85, 100% billable, there is no time for me to stop actually working on the project to enrich myself with with continuing education or learning the software, the new upgrades in the software, or sitting down and going through and taking classes to learn the new codes or all of these other things. And I literally have to do it on the fly while I'm doing the project and being billable for, both the project and my own, continuing education.
Yeah, so when we launched our HMC University, which is larger than just the technical stuff, so we're the digital academy of the university, and there's other academies. We were very clear when that launched that none of this affects anyone's project utilization because it can't.
Right.
The firm has to be willing to make that investment in its people so that they are encouraged to do better and always be learning. Because if they're not encouraged or incentivized, this is kind of a reverse incentive. It's not going to take away from your project, right? Then they won't do it. They just won't do it because they can't. They don't have the time. And so you have to be proactive about planning this stuff into your schedule. You have to have the resources in place to make it happen. This cannot be someone's side job who works on a project. It's fine if those people do Thirsty Thursdays and share some tips and tricks. Mm-hmm. But if you want real training, you have to have trainers.
Yes.
Where that's all they do.
Yes.
Because it's not like you're just holding a workshop and then everybody leaves. No, it's like you want to track people's progress. You want to make sure that they have the prerequisites done before they show up to class so that everybody at least has the same starting point. You want to follow up and get surveys with those people and see what can make the class better for the next time. You want to look for other training opportunities by engaging with those people throughout the course and then following up with those and developing curriculum around that stuff. So does that sound like something that you can do on top of a project? There's no effing way to do that, right?
Right.
And so you actually the firm has to decide, no matter how big or small it is, whether they want to make this investment or not. And just be, I almost say like it's you have to do it because technology changes so quickly. And it is hard to get leadership to buy off on that. But I think once they see the benefits of it, which if they never get to see, they never get to see.
Right.
But if they do see the benefits of it, then it's a no-brainer that of course we're going to train people. If you're just hiring kids out of school who quote unquote know quote unquote Revit, that everybody knows it, a different way, and you really want them doing that to your projects, like that's like asking a lawyer to operate on you in the
right.
operating
exactly.
room. You just can't expect anything good to come out of that. Yet it happens all the time. So if you don't take that upon yourself, which, architects are going to love to complain about the educational system, and they don't train them for what we need them to do. You can't train that. You
right.
Absolutely. These kids have the aptitude. They have the ability. They have the sponge-like brain that they can soak up any kind of training that you throw at them. But you would definitely want to train them to do it your way, or you're screwed, man, because you're going to get all kinds of crap in your models. And you're like, I remember when I was drawing back in the day and opening up somebody's model, and I started to like measure things.
Mm-hmm.
There was not anything snapped to anything. There was not anything orthogonal. It was all slightly off. And it was just like, I just drew it by eye.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, then what are you using CAD for? Right?
You don't have to. That's the beauty of the computer. You can take it to a level of precision that you'd never had been able to do with.
But this person knew Rhino, quote unquote, knew Rhino.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they knew how to draw on it. They could make a pretty picture with it. And so, of course they knew
or one that I've, pet peeve of mine is like, everybody is drawing a wall. Okay. I drew a wall. I put a door in it, put a window in it, and all this other stuff. Well, what kind of wall is it? Oh, well, it's a CMU wall. Okay.
It's a generic wall.
Well, no. So.
Thanks, Revit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, so I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So now I've drawn a CMU wall. Great. So, but there are conventions to what you do.
8 inches thick, right?
Well, it could be 8 inches thick. It could be, 6 inches. I mean, if we just use the
7 5/8. How about that?
Well, if we just use the industry convention of calling it a 6-inch block, a 8-inch block, 10-inch block, blah, 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 there's still conventions to it.
I call you Mr. Nominal here.
There's vertical, conventions. There are horizontal conventions. I mean, You're not going to just go around and start cutting block. Oh, hey, this door is at 7'3" and 5/8" or something like that. It was like, well, no, it needs to be 7'4" because that if you do the actual like math of like where the block starts and stops, it has a convention. And so you look at all these things and you're just like, the way that they're drawn, it's just like, oh, well, I needed to put the door here. It's like, but they're not going to put the door there unless you're expecting them to cut all of those blocks. And then if you're expecting them to cut all of those blocks, now you're expecting them to take an increase. Let's just say that because you've decided to put all of your windows and doors and everything else in a unconventional location for a CMU wall, now you've increased the budget of that wall that would normally have cost you X dollars to now Y dollars because you've added a bunch of additional labor that when you priced it all out, you said, oh, because I'm, using block because it's inexpensive and, there's pretty easy conventions to follow there. So, almost anybody can do it. Any mason can like sling a block. And then now you're actually asking for somebody that's a little bit more of a, an artisan because they've got to come out and cut the block and finish the block and all of this other crap. And there's so many different things that they've got to do. And the only reason that it was done the second way was because somebody didn't understand how to do it right the first time when they were drawing it. So it cost them more in construction.
Yep.
And
schools spend a lot of time teaching people about block module though, right?
Well, exactly. and so we know because, it's so funny. It's like, it's just like, it's so amazing what they don't know when they come out of school. It's, well, what the hell did you know when you came out of school?
Yeah.
You didn't know shit when you came out of school. So now you're expecting it to be different. What you came out of school with was a valuable tool of critical thinking through designs, thinking through, kind of like cause and effects of all of these other things. Now, as a practitioner, you know how to use that knowledge that you gained in school to then finish out a project. And so, yes, you learned on the job a lot of the construction methods. You learned on the job, what those, CMU block conventions and all of those other things are. And that's fine. So guess what? Now it's your job because you want that kid to come in and work on your project with you. And because you were there, what information they know and they don't know. And sure, they may know Revit, but Revit is only a tool. It is the same thing as that pencil that you used to use to draw things. And it's only...
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, and it is only the only way to make it useful is the knowledge that is added into it, that information that's added into it. And they're not going to know, oh, hey, that, 7.5-inch curtain wall system that you want me to draw in there should be the Conair 1600, SSG. Maybe it's fully captured on two sides and, mullion-less on the other two sides, blah, 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 and all this other stuff. That's all of the information that you take to add into the BIM model that kid coming out of school is not going to know what the hell all of that stuff is. And that's when you need to fill them in on all of that stuff. So and you should want to, because then they're going to do it the way you want them to do it. Exactly. That's where I was going. It was just like, and so why would you bitch and moan about them coming out with limited information when you're the one who wants to give them what you feel is the right information, the information that's best for your project?
There was a funny story that I was in this, I was trying to get to this earlier and I probably lost my train of thought and bringing it up now again because I think it fits better here even, is that I was in a small meeting with some leaders in a studio talking about what we were doing with digital practice so that they were kind of up to speed. And a senior architect is in the room and she says, yeah, but what about all these architectural mentoring? And what about, technology's great and all, and these tools are great and all, but what about mentoring these people so that they become good architects? And this person is a complainer for sure, all the time. But I looked right back and I said, that's your job.
Right.
You can't expect me to do it all for you. Like, I only have so much time in the day like you, but you're the one who's sitting with them, leading them on projects, setting out those schedules, determining what the deliverables are going to look like, doing that cartoon set, deciding what the materials are going to be used. Like, that's what you're supposed to be doing right there. And so, yeah, what was mind-blowing to me was, number one, that they thought that was somebody else's job. And I think that that's pretty common, but my mind is still blown by that. And number two, that they didn't want to do it. Because that, to me, is how you develop good architects, is by rolling up your sleeves and doing it with them and teaching them. Like this, it goes back to the oldest apprenticeship models, no matter how draconian those may seem nowadays, right? With the gig economy and all of the advances in technology. But like, that's how people learned how to become good architects, was by working with other good architects. You don't just nobody comes out of school a good architect. Nobody. You might be good at certain things in the process, but you're not a good architect, right? You're definitely not even an architect. But still, like, this is one of those careers. It takes a long time to develop you into becoming that. And it's mind-blowing to me how hands-off people are with that scenario. Like, this profession is not going to be around if you don't get involved in shaping the future of these future architects. It's just not going to happen. This also goes back, like the stuff you're talking about with the block module and putting doors and windows in. Do you ever, like, I've been going to the home improvement store quite often. So, I definitely on the weekends walking the aisles. Like, I'm shopping for a ceiling insulation right now, and I'm doing a bunch of research online. But do you ever just walk the aisles and just see what's there, see what's available?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with what you're trying to do. Yeah. It goes for tools, but it also goes for products, right? Well, it's like, there's an interesting new light fixture, new way to do that. And it's funny because, like, you're drawing a soffit and you think about, okay, how's this going to fit in the framing? Like,
yep.
Like, a young architect is not going to have they're not even going to know what the right question to ask there is. Like, how much space do I need? How far off of a soffit stud does that need to be? And you start to look at just kind of the ways that LED lights have changed the game with light fixture placement. It's pretty amazing, right? And so imagine coming to a meeting with an electrical engineer and talking about light fixtures and saying, I've been checking these out and I saw this one that does this and I think we could use it to solve this problem where we don't have any room.
Right.
Electrical engineer is probably going to be the one to do that. But if you do it too, I mean, they kind of open their eyes and they get interested, right? Oh, here's a informed teammate. Imagine that. That's cool stuff. I love that about going to the store. That's like the only redeeming quality these days of going to the store, is seeing this stuff and just kind of thinking like, oh, I'm putting that in the catalog, right? I'm going to put that in the back of my mind and keep that in mind for later, because there's some cool stuff out there. So you do that too?
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, the thing about it is that part of my job is to understand what products are out there that I can put into a building to make it, to conform to all of the different things that the client wants in their building. And so how else am I going to do that but to like walk these aisles and look at things, or, maybe like go out and visit other construction sites or other buildings to just
see it in place.
See how other people have used the stuff that's out there. Like, oh,
yeah. I remember walking like a metal deck and somebody seeing all the little studs that were welded to the deck, right? What are those? They asked.
There is a detail that the architect did at Glenstone that I am still trying to figure out how to do. And I look at the glazing system that he used and in the way that it engages the roof slab and all of that other stuff, and to the life of me, I'm still trying to figure it out, because I would still love to use that particular detail, because it's just this beautifully seamless piece of glass on the front that goes from interior glass to handrail at the green roof, and you know, but it's just all one big sheet of glass. And I
How do you waterproof that?
exactly. And those are
That's awesome.
but see, those are the questions that I'm always out there asking myself time and time again. How did somebody else do that? Because if I can figure out how they did it, then it helps me figure out like the next move, and it makes me take the, like, because we're building with, we build with a kit of parts, but we have to design by, the limitations of that kit of parts. But if somebody else is out there innovating those kit of parts to take them even further, then that's our opportunity to take our design even further. And that is our growth in our design of not only understanding the building systems, but then also, increasing our ability to be more creative with the kit of parts that are out there. Because no matter how much you want to think about it, every single solitary building that is built out there is still built with some kit of parts. And understanding those kit of parts makes you more creative.
Absolutely. I feel like there's this detail that I'm working on in my remodel of my office space that I'm doing, and it's just for an attic access hatch. And, typical residential attic access hatch is going to be some framed opening with lots of trim around it and another sheet of drywall that sits inside that. But I don't want to see all that. I don't want to change the elevation. I want it to be minimized.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to disappear, right? I don't want you to see it. I don't want it to be obvious that there's an attic access hatch there.
Right.
So I'm starting to think of ways that I could detail that so that I can build it in a way where it just disappears.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm sketching out ideas. And again, we talked about this in the last episode, I love that detailing phase where you are figuring out how all these things actually go together, or what your design intent is, so that you can get the design intent. And you get to make amazing little design decisions during the detailing process that really make things stand out.
I honestly
or disappear.
think that that's more of where the design decisions come from, because
absolutely,
you have like the big general idea. It's like, ooh, I want this ceiling to look very seamless, but oh crap, I know that I'm going to have either some access panels for HVAC equipment, or the access panel for getting up into the attic space, but I still want it to look seamless. Okay, so I've got the intent of what I want. Now how do I implement that? And it's that next phase of understanding the materials that you have out there to be able to achieve that initial intent. That is where the fun of like, ooh, I can do this, or ooh, I can do that kind of thing. And that's also why one of the things that I've always tried to make sure that I am engaged with the contractor during the construction phase, because a lot of times, you'll draw out that design intent, you'll detail out that design intent, and then they, because of 20 years of experience, or understanding a different product or a different way to use the material, will say, hey, Evan, I see what you're trying to do, and this was the way that you were thinking about doing it. Well, what if we do it this way? It'll achieve the same thing. It'll be a little bit easier to construct, and it'll actually, save both time, money, or whatever, what other benefits are. And then you're like, ooh, that's interesting. But now what you've got is you've still got the design intent. They're able to actually build it. But now you've got that institutional knowledge of, oh, that's how they're going to build this. Next time I can do it this way.
Yeah. Just to tie it back together, like the whole reason I'm going through this process is because I was window shopping down the aisles at Lowe's, and I saw some metal trim that I think I can use to accomplish my goal. And I thought, I'm going to see if I can incorporate that in, or basically at that time, I was just cataloging it in my mind and saying, oh, that's a cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now I figured out a place to use it, right? And that probably wouldn't have happened because I'm going to go look at the other attic access panel in my house and do it like that. And no, this is a new space. It's got a much cleaner look, much cleaner lines. How can I do it so that that thing disappears? And that's kind of, it's through that process. It's like nobody in architecture school is going to make you detail an attic access hatch, right?
Right.
But when you actually go to do it yourself, and this goes back to the value of knowing how things go together and knowing what products are available on the shelves at your local home improvement store.
Yeah.
And starting to kind of connect those dots when you're actually making something with your hands, or you've hired somebody to come in and do it, but you want to be very critical about the way that those things go together. That's only going to happen by all of those pieces coming together. So don't shortchange yourself by only looking at pictures on the internet. Right. Visit job sites during construction, like you're talking about, and see how things go together. Ask questions. What is that? Why is that there? How are you doing that? Instead of looking at my drawings, right? Because that happens all the time. Because, yeah, that's how you get better. That's how you learn how these things do actually go together, or could go together in different ways, to create something that again, kind of just gets back to the design intent. And that's going to inform your design intent for the next time. So it's this definitely is like an ecosystem, right? That all works together, and you can't just keep coming at it from one angle. And it also plays back into how we use the software, and it also plays back into professional development and all of these things. Like It is all this ecosystem that thrives or fails to thrive, based on your perspective and where you choose to put your time and energy into.
Yep.
Boom, done. So the challenge this week is to go to your local home improvement store with your mask on, I guess, and just window shop, just touch with your eyes, right? Just look at everything, take it in, figure out something that you could make yourself, and go looking for how you might do that, and hand draw some details if you want. Like, it doesn't matter how you do it. I think it's an important skill to be able to do that, and you can't only do that by looking at pictures on the internet. I mean, that helps sometimes, but it also helps to just go look and touch and feel and make something and fail at it and tear it apart and do it again, and like that to me is actually something I love about the construction process. And it kind of is an analog to like the early design phases, when you've got a bunch of trace and you just keep doing it over and over and over again. Like the construction process at some level is kind of like that, right? It's like I put in an electrical box and then I step back and I'm like, oh, that's the wrong place for that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put that right there. That's where a piece of art's going to go. And you have to be able to think in the future, right? So I'm going to move that electrical box so that it's not right in the middle of that wall, because I'm not drawing all this in BIM. I'm, like I said earlier, like I did the minimal drawings to get through the permit process, and now I'm kind of figuring out as I go where these things are going to go. And I didn't elevate that wall, right? So now I'm elevating it by building it. And that's a cool process, like to just say, nope, it's not going there. I'm going to tear it out and move it over here. And that's fine, right? That should be, I think everybody should experience that.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things about just that whole process was something that we kind of, and it wasn't even a, like a lecture or anything else, but back in school, one of the things that, is good about just Auburn in general is the ability to be able to go out and actually build stuff. But so when we were doing our materials and methods course, we had the opportunity to essentially build a community park for Seaside, Florida. And we did. And so we basically spent the entire first semester, designing and building all of this stuff. And then the second semester we went out and did the actual installation of it, where we, poured, or we dug holes, built some forms, blew some forms out when we were trying to do it, how to fix all of that stuff. And basically do, like pour a bunch of concrete, like build a big, huge, steel sundial, with this big brass gnomon, which I kind of got to help build and kind of shape and craft this. I don't know, it was like 18-foot long brass, like spine on the sundial. But what was interesting about it was that while we were doing all of that, and I'm not quite sure at that time that we saw the value of what we were doing, based, like connecting it together with like the future self, and seeing, that building all of this stuff enriches our design abilities. But we had an architect come by, and very well known, very notable architect come by and stop in because they were building a project in Seaside as well. And so he came by and he stepped into the old construction site and started talking to us a little bit, and, basically told us, tried to explain to us like what it meant to like hand build all of this stuff to our educational process, and what it meant to like the design aspect of things. And when Steve Bedanes finished, talking, and then he went back to, do his other thing, we were just like, who's that MF? but at the same time, you can see that he's lived a life of that very thing, of understanding and how you can stretch like your basic stuff that you pull off a Home Depot by truly understanding the craft of building so that you can enrich your design. And so like when you're going there and you're, walking the halls of Home Depot, or, just trying to figure out all of those little things and then think about all of like the ramifications. I always call it the cause and effect. It's like, okay, if you do that, what does that mean? Like think about the 7 steps next. One decision, it's like those parallel universes. It's just like, okay, you've made this decision. Think about everything that is going to happen to that one decision from now till, let's just say 20 years from now. And they're like, well, why would I do that? I just want to put the damn outlet there.
Yeah.
But Evan was like, I want to put that outlet there, but what if I want to put art up there? Or what if I want to do this? What if I want to do that? What does it mean to have that outlet there? And it's those things that I want them to constantly think about. And it's the understanding of all of that.
It's really hard to move it later, I'll tell you that.
No shit, exactly. Yeah.
Now is the best time.
Now is definitely the best time to think about where you're putting things, and just, like all of the different things. It's just like, okay, well, convention is that I would put it here. Okay, that's great. So you've got it 18 inches off of your finish, off of your floor, and, it's here, and it's just, if you plug in something, you'll be able to have a cord that reaches this far, or something like that. But what if you put a bed in the way? Now what? Are you to be able to plug in your, your bedside lamps or anything
Always
like that?
put your furniture in your plans, kids.
Yeah. I mean,
always.
It literally is. It's the, it's the total cause and effect of things.
Yeah.
Been listening to a lot of, or like I just finished watching, so I read 11/23 or 11/22/63, the Stephen King book, which is eventually about this guy who finds a wormhole and he can go back in time, but he ultimately goes back in time. Well, it's passed on from this one guy who time is trying to stop, but he's basically going back in time just to stop the JFK assassination. But then and then they keep talking about the butterfly effect and all that other stuff. And then I started watching some really dumb but also just good background stuff called Future Man, which is essentially the same thing as time travel. And now there is the Hulu show on the same Stephen King book that we're watching that. So it's all about this kind of like butterfly effect and the cause and effect. And if you change this, what does it do to that and all that other stuff? And I'm just like, to be quite honest with you, is literally what like time traveling for just a moment in time when I think about, okay, I'm going to put that outlet there. What does it mean? What a butterfly what butterfly effect am I going to have on the future of this by just doing that?
So architecture is time travel. The design process is time travel.
It sort of is, isn't it? Because we got to think about it. I mean, think about this. A lot of times, how many times are we asked to future-proof a building? We're just like, well, what the hell does that mean?
Right.
It's just
all you can do is enact a prototype of what you think that might be. There's so many possible futures. I keep coming back to architecture just needs to be as flexible as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that often means dumbing stuff down. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like making it so that it can be the most useful in lots of ways
right.
in the future.
Well,
and it's funny how many types of buildings that we do that just really need that instead of really custom spaces.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about this. I mean, how many people are in your shoes right now who are like, okay, my school system is going to be starting their first semester as virtual, so I need a space for my kids to do their homework. Okay, well, that means that even though there are some businesses that are opening up and people are going back, they're doing it in limited capacities, and they're also making the opportunity for those parents who have their kids at home, the opportunity for them to continue to work at home. So now they need an office space, and so the flexibility. I mean, you're doing this you're doing all of these things out of your house that you would otherwise never have done in your house before. And so how do you, make as you said, make the house as flexible as possible so that you can, do that evolution of space. And then what does that, I mean, think about this. You are going through so many hoops to get that back room that used to be your, kind of like multi-purpose room now into two very special things. But you've also said, okay, in the future, when it's not a classroom or when it's not an office space or when it's not this or that, it can be this. And, so again, you have to be a time traveler.
You do. I love it. That's cool. Well, that seems like a good place to put a cork in this one.
Sure.
This was a fun talk. I didn't know where we were going to go today, but I think that it was we covered a lot of ground.
I know, right?
Wow.
Well, it was time traveling. We bounce from place to place.
Oh, I need a vacation.
Yeah.
All right, that might be all for this episode, but maybe listen to the end just in case. This show is part of the Gable Media Podcast Network. See all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what we're doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out, and don't forget to share it with your friends. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at archispeakpodcast.com, where you can find our entire catalog of shows. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.
What you get. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's unpredictable as you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. This is what you get. This is a schedule. This is a set. It's unpredictable as you forget. If you blow, you can bet. I know. blow, you can bet. I know. This is what you get. This is the schedule. This is the set. It's unpredictable as you forget. It can blow, you can bet. I know.
I tell you what, I've learned that even though I, did go on vacation-ish, but I was working and stuff, there is and we've talked about this so many times in the past, but there is an absolute need to fully disconnect.
Yes. You haven't had that, and I haven't had that. I'm really jealous of the people who have.
I am too, but we'll.
Oh man,
we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah, I feel like I'm wearing so many hats right now with the 2 podcasts, and then the remodeling on the weekends, and the full-time job, and I was telling Jessie yesterday, I'm feeling so overwhelmed right now. She's like, "What can I do?" She's being super supportive, and I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what you could do. And then, BIM 360 went down. So she's like, "Can you fix this?"
Gosh, yes.
Just can't get back into the model. And it's like, oh, I am the IT also. So
we had some, I don't know if you know this, or if you've experienced this or not, but the closer and closer you get to a deadline, the more and more issues Revit decides it wants to throw at you.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, so we were on our happy hour, our team happy hour this past week. And they, and someone was just like, "Oh, I just tried to get in, I was having some issues, and so I exited out of the model, and now I can't get back into it. It says that, I need to, make a new central." And I'm like, I just synchronized. And then other people are on the call, and they're like, whoa, don't you do that, because I've still got work going on. And so everybody started to synchronize, and then I synchronized again. I'm like, okay, it's been working fine for everybody else. And he was just like, "I don't know, I keep getting this stuff." And I was like, okay, can somebody else exit out of Revit? And this is our happy hour.
Yeah.
And I was like,
triage hour, I think you mean.
Exactly. and I was just like, so exit out, try to get back in the model. And 2 people did it. I was like, well, one of them wasn't in the model at the time, and they got into the model perfectly fine. And another one exited out of the model and got back into the model perfectly fine. And so we, started doing our whole, well, did you, reboot your machine? I was like, because, that's the first thing that IT is going to tell you.
Right.
He's like, well, I can't do it until I'm off the call. And then, so.
Yeah, clearly not.
Yeah. So
I'm on the call with you.
So then we found out that, I think he was okay. It was just some glitch. And sure enough, I mean, as much as we are, kind of held captive to the, to just like what BIM 360, and the Revit model and everybody else's model and all that other stuff are, we're also kind of beholden to the fact that everybody else in our neighborhood are on the internet as well. And, in the DC area, I'm sure in the, LA, metropolitan area, it's probably very similar, but
Oh,
I mean,
course,
we've, we'll have times where like his is almost like clockwork, that at like 3:30 every day, his internet goes down. And I was like, I'm wondering if it's all of the government, employees around here basically saving all of their work at the same time to get ready to go home.
Doing their time cards.
Exactly.
So we had one person on my team. She has the worst internet. It's just terrible. It's not, we can't upgrade it. We actually sent her a MiFi card so that she can be on cellular, because she has to present. She does teaching some classes for Grasshopper and stuff. And the presentations were just so bad because the slides wouldn't be at the same place where she was talking. And so then she was like talking over the cell network as one attendee in the meeting, and then presenting from her computer as another attendee, like to try to break up the bandwidth. It was a disaster. So we finally figured out what the culprit was, and it was just to turn off OneDrive syncing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we were on happy hour at the end of last week, and I'm like, did you get an upgrade on your internet? You look so clear. Like you're not stuttering. And she's like, she just has like this evil grin. She's like, I turned off OneDrive.
Yeah.
And it was just taking over her bandwidth. And the thing is like, it's just constantly looking for changes, right? So
right.
BIM 360 is not like that. And it actually does a really good job about not being super chatty over the internet. It's the only reason why it works for everybody.
Right.
Because everybody's internet has a different latency and a different speed. And, you can't really count on residential internet versus enterprise internet.
Mm-hmm.
So the connections just, they're a lot different. So, she has terrible internet, this and that. Everybody's got a different story. BIM 360 doesn't really care about that, and that's why it works, and that's why everybody's on it, because it's just not expecting constant communication.
Right.
Because if it were, we'd be screwed. And this is why working over the VPN sucks, right?
It totally sucked.
It's the worst.
Plural.
I mean, because it's super chatty, tense. And yeah.
For us, it's past tense. We don't VPN anymore.
Well, if you're on BIM 360, you don't need to, unless,
right.
In our case, we are if you're trying to access other files on the server that are, you might need to refer to or whatever. So yeah, we could still have that issue, and we're trying to solve that. But it's a trick, man.
Whatever is, I mean, and maybe it is still a sort of VPN type thing, but whatever that global connect, global protect thing is that we do, I literally am on my computer at home, and it treats it exactly the way. I don't have to, go through, remote desktop or, connect through the VPN or anything else. When I open up my computer at work, and it automatically connects to the server, when I'm at home, as long as I have internet connection, it does the exact same thing. And it literally is like I am sitting in the office while I'm sitting at home. So
that's awesome.
Whatever we are doing, I really like.
Shout out to John Eaton.
Johnny E.
That guy's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I'm going to go shopping, I guess, for ceiling insulation.